Welcome to Team Perry's Step Out of Line podcast, featuring co-hosts Perry and Lori Finkelstein. Together, they explore, meet, and share inspirational stories with guests who have made a positive impact in today's world. This podcast resonates with our hope to make this world a better place one step at a time through love, acceptance, and uplifting conversations.
I'm sure people recognize Joel Johnstone for playing Archie in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. We were watching the Emmys, and Alex Borstein won an Emmy, and she gave an amazing speech about her grandmother who was in the Holocaust. And I'm sure you remember because you were there, and I think you won a beautiful Emmy that night also. You won numerous.
I think it was the year before that we won. I don't know. I was there both times,
right.
And I remember watching that speech from,
and it was awesome. And it really
yeah.
affected us. And she talked about how her grandmother had stepped out of line. And she said, what will happen if I step out of line? And the guard said, I'm not going to do anything, but, see, I don't know what's going to happen. Alex said, ladies, step out of line. Let's all step out of line. So we really took that to heart. And we started interviewing people for our segments. And first we started finding out how people are handling Corona, and we did all that. We did about 25 interviews. And then we've done probably 25 more interviews about how people have stepped out of line in their lives. And that's our question. Our biggest question is, we like to ask people in their life, sometimes people step out of line and some amazing things happen. And some people step out of line and they wish they hadn't. We interviewed somebody last week and we said, how did you step out of line? She goes, I've been in business. I'm the CEO. I can handle everything. The biggest thing I'm doing stepping out of line is doing this interview because I don't feel comfortable talking in public. And we were like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So Perry, as you know, does marathons. She has muscular dystrophy. She competes in marathons every year. And she also raises money. She's raised over $600,000 for kids who have illnesses and cancer. And this is amazing for a child who was not supposed to make it past 6 years old. And she's a junior in school in Adelphi University. She's doing well. And she stepped out of line so many times in her life, more so than I ever could. So not to put you on the spot, Joel, but how have you stepped out of line at any point in your life? And what was the outcome? Career?
Well, I feel like anything I'm going to say is going to pale in comparison. Perry, I follow you and I'm familiar with your story and everything. And I just want to say what an inspiration you are, and how much respect I have for marathoners like you and all. My sister is a marathoner, and the money and awareness that you have raised, I adore you, and I just think you are special beyond words. So thank you. Me step out of line. I will say that the scariest thing I've ever done. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a relatively small-ish city. Two native New Yorkers like you guys. It's I'm sure a tiny little town. To me, it was a city growing up, but I was 18 and I moved to New York City. There was something about, I could have told you when I was 12 I was going to live in New York City someday, and I don't know why. And I was the only one of my inner nucleus of friends to leave the state. And I still couldn't tell you exactly why. I just knew I needed to get out and I needed to live in New York. And I lived in New York throughout my entire 20s. And that was the first big brave step I made. I wasn't even sure that I was going to be an actor. I just knew that I needed to get out and move to New York. And I don't feel like I began to discover my own identity until I got to New York and started to discover who I was as a person, not just professionally, not just as an actor, but just really came into my own. And that, it was scary as hell to
imagine
move from a town of a couple 100,000 to New York City.
What did you do? Like, where did you live, and what was your first job?
Well, I lived on campus. I went to the I went to the campus at Lincoln Center. There's several for Fordham. There's one up in the Bronx, and I my favorite actor growing up still is Denzel, and Denzel went to Fordham, and that was all I needed to be sold on when I was looking at colleges. And I said, if I'm going to study acting, I want to study where Denzel studied, and so that was my reasoning for going to Fordham. And I lived right there at 60th and Columbus for 4 years. And then I moved to Brooklyn after for 5 years. And then just a few months before I had already, expired my lease on my apartment, bags were packed. I met the love of my life, my now wife, and mother of my child, as I was moving to LA. And so that was another interesting move and experience of going back and forth. She eventually followed me out here, and now we are happily married with a family. So, but yeah, just again, growing up relatively small town America, and moving to the biggest city in the country was the scariest step I've ever taken, I would say. And probably what comes to mind most if somebody were to ask, as you're asking me, that was my step out of line moment.
Could you imagine if you didn't? Your whole life would be different.
I imagine it all the time, Lori. Just how drastically different it would be. Not particularly better or worse, but it would be different. So different.
So now I know you've done a lot of acting, and you've done an amazing amount of work. And the biggest work that right now you're doing, of course, is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I would say hands down that and Schitt's Creek is probably our favorite series we've ever watched. And we go through a lot of series. And the character that you play on Maisel is, we root for you. And season 1 and 2, you were kind of quiet. You were the best friend. You always try to give good advice. And then season 3, your character started pushing the limits on everything. And we saw it happening. And literally, I think Perry was watching you, and we covered our eyes because Perry did many papers in.
Did you really?
Yeah. And a few of them on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and really interesting. It would have been great had there been a correlation between what the paper had to be on to your character, and she could have explored. You did a little bit. Yeah. Oh, maybe you'll send it.
No, I would love to read it. Please send it, Perry. I would love to read it. I would love to.
The fact that universities are writing papers on Mrs. Maisel and the characters and the roles that people represent. So how did you feel when you saw your character going into this dangerous direction of following Joel Maisel's path of deviating from, marriage with the wife and the kids and pushing the envelope a little bit? We were literally screaming, "No, don't do it." And right, and you took off the ring. I was like, "No, don't take off the ring." Yeah, and you did switch roles with your friend. How did you feel? Were you happy that it was getting really juicy, or were you like, "Oh, I just can't do this to this poor guy. What are we gonna do?" Like, how as an actor do you feel?
Well, one, and I'm biased because I play him, but my hunch is that Archie wouldn't have actually gone through with anything. My hunch is that he was just being a knucklehead, and I'll leave it at that. The show, specifically the Joel role, is about an imperfect person. He is a good person who did something bad and has paid the price for it, and will continue, is continuing to pay the price for it. And I prefer to play imperfect people because I don't know a perfect person. We're all complicated. We all make good and bad choices, and that minutia is where you find the art. And so I relished that when I read it and got to play it. And I mean, this is my favorite project that I've ever been a part of, and it's just every day feels like going to the playground. It really does. It feels it just feels like play every time.
And you get paid for it. It's like incredible.
I'm the luckiest person in the world. I really am.
I hope we get so many more seasons out of it. We have the Haggadah, which is what you use on Passover. They had like a Mrs. Maisel Haggadah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we just got the Life game on Amazon that features, Mrs. I mean, we're very big fans and we love it. But I think
that warms my heart.
What brings people to love it is it reminds me of like my childhood sitting in my grandmother's house, listening to the music and the songs and the Catskills. I mean, me as a New Yorker, I've always done that kind of thing. So I feel it, and it's hysterical. We have
Did you go to the Catskills in the summer?
Of course. We have
amazing.
We have a holiday called Purim. It's like the Jewish Halloween. And you have to, usually you get dressed up and you theme and you send out baskets to people, and we like to theme it. So when our first time that we watched Mrs. Maisel, that first season, we themed it and we did everything revolving around Mrs. Maisel. And we also gave it toilet plunger, and we put all so we gave it like 50 toilet plungers. And we also gave out baskets to the hospital. I said, look, I can't really give out plunges to these poor kids in the hospital. So we like switched it up a little bit and made it a little bit more normal. But literally we had people running down the street holding toilet plunges stuffed with food in it, wrapped. Yeah. It's just so much fun. You're very fortunate and lucky, I'm sure you are, to be involved. Mm-hmm. What do you see yourself doing in the future? Like once, I know have you done writing and producing as well? I think I read that you were doing other things also.
I have and continue to all the time. It's just I have a couple different projects in various stages that you never know what will actually live to see the light of day and what will just sit on my bookshelf for eternity. But yeah, I do. I'm doing a podcast with one of my longest friends. We've been friends for 20 years, Jeff Meacham, who's he's one of the characters on Blackish, where we just started a podcast. We're having a great time. It's a very pandemic friendly medium that we're able to do, and that I believe comes out in January. But yeah, there's a few other projects that I have going with some writer friends of mine as well.
It's strange how the pandemic has led us to seek things like Perry never would have started interviewing people and never would have been able to connect to so many people if it wasn't the pandemic. So we've interviewed so many people based on, like, Scary Jones did an interview with us and in his kitchen, and he had his whole mic set up, and we were meeting him we had met before. We had actually done a podcast on his Z100 once, interviewing Perry. Yeah, it was kind of cool. But we're connecting with so many different people, and I know Perry was nervous about talking to new people and meeting new people. And I think this has changed her whole perspective on things.
Well, I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome because you realize that people are just regular people, where we all have some connection. There's always something that we can find in common, whether it's our love for this one show or, your sister does marathons, we were reading, and I'm thinking, I think Joel should really do a marathon one day in his life as well, rather than just say, wow, I really like people who do marathons,
I have actually. My sister motivated me to I ran the LA marathon with my sister right before my son was born. So geez, this is almost 5 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. But no, I love to run. I don't think I've run anything over 10 miles since the marathon, but I love running. My sister is an ultra runner. So she does like crazy 100-mile races and stuff like that all the time. She really pushes the envelope. Talk about stepping out of line. She's in a whole different class of running that I have no desire to ever be a part of. I just watch in awe as she does that. But I will say, just going back about things we've discovered during the pandemic, any time a limitation is placed on anyone, there's the optimist in me looks for opportunity, and you know, I think that we have all discovered these opportunities to connect in ways that always existed before, but we just didn't take advantage of. A perfect example, I've done several all family Zoom sessions. Family members of mine that I only see once, you know, or twice a decade, I've now seen a couple times during this pandemic. And we were like, why haven't we always done this? Why, you know, Zoom wasn't created just 7 months ago. People just started learning about it. And, you know, and there's other various video chat, you know, that we could have always done this. And I ironically feel more connected to my extended family now than I did pre-pandemic.
I get it totally. I've been speaking to friends I haven't spoken to in years because I want to know, how are you doing? You know, you really want to know how people are faring, and you want to tell them, look, I'm here if you need me, because it's really hard. You know, you think you're a strong person and anybody can just crack through this, you know, pandemic. It's been difficult in that sense. And but for somebody like Perry's been like quarantining almost her entire life, she feels. You know, we've always very cautious of, you know, where she goes, and people have to be healthy. So Perry's probably the most prepared for this pandemic than any of us. And, you know, for her, she just needed an espresso machine and she was all set. You know, she's pretty much quarantined. She's good. It's been, you know, a little bit more difficult for the rest of us. So, you know, as you know, Perry's goal is to make friends, meet people, find out about their lives. And it was really, really, really sweet of you to agree to be interviewed and be, you know, one of the top people that Perry wanted to interview. And the fact that you said yes really is a big deal to her. So thank you so much.
Well, Perry, it is such a pleasure. I'm completely sincere when I say I am inspired beyond words by you, and you got a friend for life here, and anything and everything I can do, I want to help in any way. So, you know, you do let me know. Yeah.
That's so awesome. We can't wait to see what's in store for the next season.
Me too.
We hope you behave, but we know that you're going to bring a lot of fun to the show, and we're going to go back and watch a few other things that you were on too that we might have missed, because it's just,
thank you.
There's just so much to watch and so many series to get through, which is probably so much fun. Right now we're going through Friends. She never saw Friends before. So
yeah. I mean, look, we're at a golden age in TV right now. I have a queue that I've made of, you know, 50 shows, 50 brilliant shows that I still have not even begun. And there's so many wonderful, you know, when I grew up, everyone said, oh, there's nothing good on. Nobody can say that now. Nobody can ever say that again for as long as they live. Like, there's so much good stuff, and that's why being on something that people watch and has eyeballs and has people's attention is all the more special, because that now has become a rarity, and just to be on a show like this where people are watching it and loving it is special all in itself.
Oh, that's so nice. You know what? I just finished watching. David Letterman started interviewing. He has 3 seasons. Did you have?
Yes, I have not seen all of them, but I've seen some of them. Yeah, I watched the first couple with Obama and Clooney, and I watched the Kanye one. I watched one other one. I forgot which one.
There was just
John Lewis. Didn't he have John Lewis on?
Yes.
Yeah.
The race driver. Yes, I just went through all of them, and amazing. Like, I'm so amazed. And you know, you're not in school anymore. You can't like sit down and learn, you know, so for you to be able to learn like so much about somebody's life, it's just pretty amazing. So that I really enjoyed. Also, I watched all of David Simon's shows, and that gets you in a dark place sometimes. But, you know, I went through like months. I like watching series like that. So, but now, you know, we're into comedies, which is good. We're into things that are very uplifting, like the show.
Yeah, a pandemic is a good time to start binging some comedies. That's the
next marathon we're doing. What I do is I push Perry till mile about 12. Depends how she feels and how she's doing, and then she usually walks the last mile.
I know. I watched your video. if somebody's looking for motivation, Perry, look no further. Really, seriously.